Hello and welcome back. It is awesome to be back in the show again. I love hosting this thing. It's just so much fun. And one of the things that I find so fun about it is we just keep talking about faith and finances. And it's like, well, what are not some of the most delightful things to talk about? And one of the things we're actually going to add to that is it's not just faith and finances today, it's faith, finances, and married life. And in a particular way, we're not just discussing like family life, we're talking about married life, the relationship between a husband and a wife, and how money plays its part in that marriage. And, hopefully marriage is something that is building up the family, it's building up the kingdom of God, and it's being an instrument for your good, not a place of conflict. But we also recognize that at times, money is a place of conflict, maybe it's a recurring place of conflict in the relationship. And so we thought it would just be really important to talk about the context of money within married life between the husband and wife, and how money can be a source for your good and not something that's a constant source of frustration or difficulty. So to kind of walk us through that is another member from the Catholic Financial Planners Network, Kenny Senour, who's got some prior experience really focused in this in his career in this notion of marital finances. And so, Kenny, just want to take a moment and bring you on the show. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, and thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks for having me, and excited to talk about a topic I'm passionate about today.
Yeah, you had shared when we were chatting ahead of the call that, some of your prior career kind of led you or having a focus in, in this concern of how can we be building up families and having money be a source for their good. Could you just share a little bit about how your career has kind of helped shaped this as a central theme for some of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the common things I hear from couples that first come to meet with me is, they're deeply in love and excited to either get married, because occasionally I'll talk with people in marriage prep or are recently married, and they, are excited about starting life together, but they may have very different financial habits and expectations that they're bringing into the marriage. And I love getting to help couples talk through that and bring a lot of that to the surface. My background, I'm one of 7 children. So grew up near Colorado Springs, Colorado. Grew up with 2 loving parents, dad that worked hard and commuted to Denver, and a mom that stayed home with all 7 of us. Great parents overall. But honestly, a lot of what led me to digging more into financial planning and financial advising was due to some of my upbringing. So parents that weren't necessarily on the same page with finances all the time, but I saw how amazing it can be when couples are on the same page financially, and a lot of that just kind of nudged me towards what I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think money, because we do some pre-marriage weekends where my wife and we lead, along with some other team members, preparation for marriage. And, the engaged couples are coming in and they meet with us for about 24 hours over the course of 2 days. And we chat through a whole number of, topics that come up. And, some of the 2 steamy topics, if you will, is sex and money. And these are,
Sure.
items that we address and bring up. And, we actually kind of start our Saturday morning off, chatting about that. It's like, it's a wake up call. Let's get you guys paying attention now. So we'll talk about 2 of the 2 items that might cause the most conflict in your relationship. And the sad truth is that, the leading causes of divorce, at least according to what the statisticians tell us, is, money conflicts was number 1. More of late, unfortunately, it's pornography. But, hitting upon this notion of sex and money, these are actually things where this is consistently problems that degrade the quality of the relationship and take you from this happy, lovey-dovey place where, you couldn't think ill in any way of the other person, to where now you're to a point where you no longer want to share your life together, and you want to move on right through divorce. And so I think, Kenny, what we could start to chat about is, what role does money have within the eyes of the church, and how can we have money not be this place of conflict, but this place of good? Like, let's start off with what the church has to offer on that. You had shared some thoughts. What are some things top of mind for you?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, so I had mentioned this earlier, but it's one of those things where you start going through the catechism of the Catholic Church and you kind of realize like, oh, there's a lot of good stuff in here. You know, I don't know about you. I don't read it as often as I should, but when I start using it as a research tool, it's really amazing to see how rational and how much makes sense. And there's a great framework the church presents around money and how to implement that in a Catholic family. So, I mean, Catholic teaching really frames money through that notion of stewardship, detachment, and personal responsibility. And one of the paragraphs I referenced is it's 2404 in the Catechism, and it mentions man should regard the external goods he legitimately owns not merely as exclusive to himself, but common to others also. So that's that notion of stewardship, and specifically it mentions, the task of making it fruitful and communicating its benefits to others. First of all, his family. So it specifically mentions, first of all, to your family. And that's something I really enjoy helping couples talk through from that Catholic framework of, the church has given us this notion of stewardship and is actually directing us as Catholics to communicate and educate our spouses and our families on that. And then, of course, that notion of detachment from wealth. So this is something, honestly, getting into the financial planning industry, I struggled with myself, where I said, there's that verse or parable on, the rich man needs to sell everything, and then he goes away unhappy. And it's that concept where it's not necessarily that money is the root of all evil, right? It's the love of money. So how can we have that spiritual detachment while still being good stewards of our wealth or good stewards of our income, and translating that into savings or, investments? So in a way, detachment can be saving it and investing it for the future, right? Because if you're not just wanting to spend that right away, or blow it on something, that you may or may not need immediately, you're actually storing that for your future self and the future of your family. So detachment, and then personal responsibility, I would say is really the third framework that the church has given us for money. So, the idea that your financial resources should serve human dignity and serve your family life. So how can we enter into marriage looking at money as something that's going to serve our vocation and not something that's going to hinder our vocation?
Yeah, so I love all three of these. And, one of the pieces, going to stewardship, right? It's getting back to this message and this notion that, God created the world ex nihilo, from nothing, and has given it all over to us. And so everything that we have, like our very selves and our bodies are coming forth from him. And, that the fundamental reality, leads itself to our human relationships being one in which we're all part of this family of God. We all originate and have our belonging back to him. And so, we have a responsibility to care for what he's given to us. But in caring for that, we can't claim and call it our own. Because, if we start to do that, going to the notion of detachment, which goes well in hand between stewardship and detachment, fundamentally, like the concern that consistently happened with the Jews and ultimately the Christians, sharing in that ancestry, is that we kept placing and making, money, gold, as the idol, as the calf, the golden calf, and this is
Right.
now our God, and this is who we're going to follow and observe and worship, and we're going to trust ourselves in money. Thankfully our country still today, right? It's in God we trust, not in money we trust, which is an interesting observation and something to kind of take away. It's in God we trust. And in order for it to be in God we trust and not in money we trust, there has to be this detachment, I think, from money where it doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to other people, it belongs to God. And, again, that kind of evokes this notion of stewardship, that we're here to be caretakers of this. The real Lord of it isn't us, it's God. But then let's spend a little time with this notion of personal responsibility, Kenny, because, in your take on it from the church's teaching, like what is that calling us forth? That we can't just shirk this responsibility onto somebody else, or that for each of us we have something that's been doled out that only we can fulfill. Like, how's your interpretation or understanding of this notion of personal responsibility when it comes to money?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, I don't claim to be a church theologian or anything. So, but the way I believe the church is really presenting it to us is Catholic teaching doesn't reject wealth, right? It rejects the notion that the wealth or the money is the ultimate priority. So I think the logical question is, okay, if it doesn't reject wealth, then what is it really calling us to do with that wealth? And it's being a steward of it and putting it to the proper use in order within the family and within the marriage. So I think that's that notion of personal responsibility, as a husband or wife. If I'm the primary breadwinner for the family, how am I making sure that we're putting our resources to proper use? Am I making sure there's food on the table for our kids first and foremost, for each other, keeping the lights on, but also am I, secretly racking up credit card debt and not telling my spouse about it? Or one that I'm starting to see now is like sports betting, not to harp on sports betting, but it's starting to come up a lot in conversations. But, if you bring it back to that framework, how do those things fit within that responsibility I have to my family, as the husband or wife? And if they don't, why is it something that we're directing our resources to?
Yeah, well, I think responsibility in itself, like the term from it or of it, ultimately derives from this notion of a response. And so, it's like, how are we responding to the call of God? And, who are we making the Lord in our lives? Because whether, we want to admit it or not, I think we all make something our Lord. We all need a God. We all need an idol. And the decision is our God going to be the true and living God, or is it going to be something that is an artifice or a deviation of him? And so, like that notion of personal responsibility is like a claim, it would seem to me, in which we're like saying this, I'm taking a stand here, and the God that I follow is going to be the true and living God, and like I'm going to adhere to that and not to something else that's less than that. And that then that I suppose it comes with responsibilities that now has like obligations that fall upon us. That if we're really going, obligations almost mean like this tying, like it's literally like we're tying ourselves to it. It's like, well, if we really are tying ourselves to it, then we have to demonstrate that. Like there are certain things that we need to do in order to show that we're real, that we're serious about the claim that we're making. Otherwise it's just all empty talk, and talk is cheap, as they say. So like, are your words real? So I think that's wonderful, right? So we're getting away from this notion of superficiality, and like, I think at the heart of it is like, who's your idol? Who's your God? Is money going to be that, or is money the tool, a place of service for us? Let's chat then, like, well, how does some of this teaching apply in married life? Like, what does that mean in order, like specifically, not just family life, but married life, like between the husband and wife in their marriage? How do we take this and say, how do we build a better relationship with the use of money? What are at least some of the observations that you've seen or had there, Kenny?
Yeah, I think I mean, a lot of the points you hit on are spot on. And I think how it should serve the marriage is, I mean, that's kind of the core idea, right? Is it should serve the marriage. It shouldn't control the marriage. So I think modern society and even ancient societies, like you said, treat money as like a scoreboard for success, right? So maybe 1,000 years ago it was how much gold you had, and maybe now it's more outward expressions of wealth. So it's driving a really nice car, or that kind of concept of lifestyle inflation. So I think that's one way within a marriage, that if you're communicating early on around expectations and even what habits you're bringing into the marriage, there's less of you chasing those superficial things as a couple, and more of, okay, these are some of the core values we've discussed as a couple. I'm a natural saver, I'm a natural spender, for example, but this is the financial plan we're going to follow together, because it's, this is what we're being called to as a married couple when we look at wealth and money in the framework of the church. So yeah, how does it serve the marriage and not control it? And how do we look at the fruits of our marriage, the unity in our family, in our vocation, and confidence in our marriage, I would say too, just confidence that we're walking on this plan together, and we're not chasing the dollar sign, the balances in our accounts, or the nicer car, or upgrading to the newest thing, or the really expensive vacation. Maybe it's something that's more reasonable for our family and for our budget, but yeah, not chasing the material superficiality of finances and money, but chasing how can it serve our marriage, and what are things we can implement to kind of plan for it to stabilize and be a foundation in our marriage.
Yeah, money's an interesting thing, not just within family life or married life, but now let's just talk about social life. And, I suppose it depends on how much credence you want to give towards like sexual evolutionary theory. But if we allow that to speak to this a little bit, there's a notion in which money is the reflection of one's status within society, and how well can you buck off the next buck and be the top dog. And if you go into these kind of hoity-toity social get-togethers, fundraising dinners, part of the whole dynamic that can be in play there is people kind of demonstrating and showing off their tails of sorts of like what kind of swagger they have, financially speaking. And I don't think ultimately this is God-centered or the way that it's intended, but yet I do think these sort of things are still present among us and on display. And so that's just to say there's these influences that are present that we have to at least be mindful of and recognize. And, this isn't just like in smaller social settings, this notion of status kind of pervades throughout society. Certainly at times, it's like the desire for bigger vacations or nicer homes or bigger cars are all attempts to turn around and demonstrate just, how big of a buck you are, like in a very, very natural sense, right? And it's all for nothing. I think it kind of echoes back to this sentiment of like, well, is money our God, or is it going to be the true and living God? That's our God. And so, where there can be a conflict here is, we're kind of moving away from a shared responsibility maybe in the marriage and having this be for each other's good. And instead it's this notion of just, for show, like we're trying to keep up with the Joneses or to look good for others, but that maybe we can't, or we don't like where we stand. And like, I don't know, there's maybe a point of this in any marriage of coming to terms with where you're situated and, what you can be doing together to get somewhere, rather than maybe the concern, I would think, specifically in this notion of a relationship, is that it gets lopsided, and the attempt to kind of move ahead in society or respond to that pressure just falls on one or the other person. And, that kind of opens the possibilities for, being overburdened or having betrayal. So we chatted a little bit, Kenny, about this notion of being, overburdened, where everything's falling on the one person and they're stretching themselves, trying to, demonstrate their status as much as possible. But what about this notion of betrayal? Because you've alluded to this too a little bit, at least in some of our conversations, where people can be caught off guard. And what's just an example that you've seen firsthand of that within a marital relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because one of the there's a couple of common, mistakes, for lack of a better word, that I see with newly married couples, and I've made a lot of them too, and we continue to make a lot of them. So this is not coming from a place of, I'm perfect with my finances and have all the right answers. It's more just observations, but avoidance is part of that. So avoiding money conversations, and that's where it can lead to that concept of almost like not marital infidelity, but it's more like a financial infidelity. So there was a couple recently that we were going through the process of getting everything linked to our planning portal. So a lot of times we'll use software, right, to get all the financial accounts linked so that we can start to see everything in one place. And it became very clear that as we were linking different accounts, one spouse was linking more and more credit cards and balances on those credit cards. And the other spouse, I think in the conversation, I think the way the conversation went was, I have some credit card debt and that was about it. And I think it became very clear what some meant once they started linking everything. So that was almost a fork in the road for this couple to say, like, this financial secrecy or infidelity, whatever you want to call it, could have been something that started to weaken and kind of eat away at the relationship, or it could be something that we use to strengthen our marriage and say, okay, now it's all like we're shining the light on it. It's all coming to the surface. How are we going to address this as a team? And in credit to this couple, it ended up being a great example where they were on the same page. They kind of brought it all to the surface. They developed a plan for paying down the higher interest debts really aggressively. The other spouse ended up finding another role where they were making a lot more money. So they did use it as an opportunity to go ahead and try and strengthen their marriage. But there's other examples I mentioned, like, I don't want to harp on sports betting, but it's something that's started to come up more and more, where it's kind of an easy thing to do on the side. And I think there's sometimes things within for Catholics where I don't know what it is. I had mentioned we both went to Franciscan University, and I feel like I would observe more people who smoked on Catholic campuses than others. And it felt like one of those things where it's like, well, smoking is not immoral on its own. But it's something like we can do as Catholics, and sports betting almost feels like that as well, where it's like, it's not, the church doesn't say that gambling is immoral, but when it becomes an obsession and when it becomes harmful to yourself and to your marriage, that's where it can become an issue. So.
Yeah, we can bet on the ponies, I suppose, as they say, or have some fun with it. But it's this consistent theme here is whenever we turn it into an idol, and in some ways in which we start to know it's become that is because it becomes detrimental or harmful, not just to yourself but to others or to the relationship. And then if there gets to be some denial or shame, that's present. To money again is kind of a funny thing because people can be kind of delusional is probably too strong of a term, but they can just be at a loss or just not paying attention, or they're kind of just lost, they're to what's taking place, and it kind of catches up and hits you by surprise, and you're like, oh shoot, I wasn't aware of it. It had gotten that far along. Not just for the spouse who wasn't spending the money, but the one who was. Like, maybe there gets to be so many different credit cards and balances, and you're just not keeping track of it all, and it seems like everything is fine. But then, like, the harsh reality when you start to put all the numbers together, you're like, oh boy, this is getting to be a rather large sum of credit card debt. The good news is like we do have our weaknesses, right? And so that's not the good news, but we do. I mean, it's just life. We each all have our strengths. We each all have our struggles. And part of, marriage and, the call of marriage, the vocation of marriage is for each person to help each other become a better version of themselves and ultimately to get each person to heaven. And, part of, hopefully what makes for good marriage is maybe something that you're not as good at, the other person can step in and have strength to, and vice versa. And so like there's this mutual reciprocity of giving back and forth, which I think fundamentally is kind of found in our theology and the Trinity and this relationship amongst each other. Although I don't want to get too far off theologically, I'm not sure if we could say like there's a deficit that's being made up by each person within the Trinity. The theologian might have gripe with that. But anyhow, what I'm trying to say is there's just this complementarity in our relationships of support. But it's a shared responsibility. And, I suppose what we're trying to get to, Kenny, is this notion of like money and finances need to be a shared component to a person's life and not a place where it's either lopsided or overburdened or there's hidden secrecy, right? And which things are happening that are unknown to the other person, and then maybe will come out of the blue and just, wallop them with the surprise of, oh shoot, what you've got, tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. Like how did that happen? But folks, if you're looking for help in this, maybe you find yourself in this conversation. You're like, gosh, this is kind of us, or I'm the one who's got the credit card debt, or my husband or wife just has the credit card debt, and you're looking for help, if someone to give you some guidance. What we're going to start to chat about is how an advisor can help in these relationships and function in somewhat of a way of like almost a marital therapist. But at least just having conversations to get things straightened out, there can be significant benefit. And so there's the Catholic Financial Planners Network that both Kenny and I are a part of. We continue to grow, thankfully, month by month, in which, the intent of the network is to gather together advisors, all across the country who have a commitment to good financial advice and have a commitment to their Catholic faith. And so we're always looking for, clients to connect with and work with and see how we can be of benefit to them. And so if you're looking for someone who might be able to assist you in these sort of ways, reach out to an advisor in the Catholic Financial Planners Network. Maybe reach out to Kenny here and see if, he can be of help to you in your finances. That's why the network exists. That's why it's here. So Kenny, to kind of chat on that, then let's talk like how can an advisor be helpful in a marital relationship to get the husband and wife to grow stronger and to be more of a team and to share these things and have this complementarity rather than having this conflict and this lopsidedness or this, betrayal potential. Like how can an advisor work with a married couple to have money be for their good?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had talked a little bit about a values exercise that I'll occasionally do with clients, and I think it's a really good exercise that I will take people through. I know there are other advisors do this as well, to kind of bring that conversation to the surface. And it is kind of funny because sometimes I'll be in a meeting, and especially early on, and one of the spouses will say like, oh, this is kind of like therapy, like marriage therapy, which I wasn't really expecting. Like I thought we were just going to talk about the stock market and investing, and it's really feels like a therapy session. But I mean, you brought it up at the beginning of the podcast. Sex and money are the two kind of taboo topics that couples don't often talk about early on, and honestly, money probably more so. I think a lot of couples are less willing to talk about money than the other topic. So as an advisor, I can help facilitate that conversation. That values exercise, I'll take them through, and I know there's similar exercises out there, but I'll give a couples, each spouse an identical deck of cards that'll have different values listed on them. So words like security, freedom, trust, humor is one of them on there. And I'll have them take a couple minutes, go through the cards, and I'll have them rank like, the top 15, then the top 10, than the top 5 to kind of whittle down to the top 5 values. And then we'll kind of present those side by side. And that sparks a lot of good conversation around, like, you know, one of your values is security, for example. What does that mean to you? And a lot of times it means, like, I just want to make sure, I want to know that we're okay. Like, I want to know that if something really bad happened to one of our jobs where we're out of work for a little bit, that we're okay. Or I want to know that we're on the right track, and I want to feel secure in our finances, and therefore in our marriage. So that's, you know, my wife and I did it. We actually went through the exercise ourselves, because I wanted to kind of run through it with her, to say, like, this is something I take clients through. But it was interesting even for us to go through it and see some things that were surprising, and it just sparked really good conversation. You know, one of them, I think that came up for us was humor. Is kind of a shared value, and even in my practice, humor comes up a lot, because when you're talking with married couples, a lot of times there are things that have been unsaid for a really long time, and they'll come up in that meeting, and sometimes they'll come out as kind of a shot to the other spouse almost. So, for example, you know, all the online shopping, you know, he or she does, they're running us dry or whatever, and in a way you need to kind of redirect that as an advisor. And you know, and I've used humor to say, like, oh yeah, the delivery driver is basically raising our kids. You know, they're there like a couple times a week and know all our kids and ask about like their siblings and stuff. So you, as an advisor, you have to, it really helps to be able to redirect some of those attacks at times. But yeah, the values exercise has been really interesting and
that's funny, Kenny, just to chime in on that, because, you know, for many years it's been the milkman, right? But now maybe we're in the age of Amazon. Now it's the delivery driver you got to keep an eye out for, right?
It's a little different now.
The mailman is going out the door too. It's the milkman, the mailman. Now it's the delivery driver who's problematic.
True.
But there is something to be said for having some good humor, not taking ourselves too seriously, and be able to poke fun and chat through things. And that doesn't, you know, perhaps if something is too sensitive, this isn't something that we can resolve as financial advisors. There's still need to actually meet with perhaps a therapist, someone who's licensed and got more training specifically in the matters. But, you know, we can help facilitate conversations and make sure that there's an equal voice in the relationship, and things aren't getting lopsided and overshadowed, and one person isn't just running the show and calling all the shots and being a bit of a bulldog on the finances. Because it's, you know, when you're in that sort of situation, you know, the one who's being overrun, you feel a bit lost, because, you know, honestly, it's like a hostage arrangement or something, where it's just like, it's all up to the person who's got the keys and saying everything. And if they'll let me out of the cellar or something, you know, I get a chance to go out, but they're in complete control. And it's like, well, that's definitely not the vision or the image that's being called or given to us from God, especially with Adam and Eve in the garden originally. And so, like, that's, you know, hopefully that's not where you find yourself. But if that happens to be, like, that's kind of a clear line of, like, wait a second, this isn't right. This isn't what the church is calling for. Something does need to be addressed and corrected, because that's not the intent of a shared responsibility in marriage. But Kenny, to your point on this values exercise, like, as much as we're married and we are attracted to each other, and there's reasons why we're attracted, there's at least got to be some overlap, or you know, get a sense of getting along in the relationship. You know, we think of ourselves as a good team, you know, in the early stages of that, you know, dating and then maybe into marriage. We're not exact replicas of each other, right? There are some things that one will do better than the other, or that others have needs that maybe I don't have, but my wife has needs that that wouldn't be something that would mean or speak a lot to me, but it's important to her. And so just like bringing attention and awareness to, like, hey, it's not just all about you, buddy. Like, you need to be paying attention about your wife, or vice versa. Like, is that kind of one of the takeaways that you're finding in this values exercise? Is it just helps people become more aware of their differences, and hopefully more attuned to how they can be supportive in those differences?
Well, I think that, and I think it also reveals motivations, right, for your spouse. And as you said, there's obviously scenarios where a licensed therapist, like they're the ones who should take you through some of the less financial conversations. But yeah, for example, if one spouse values security, they may prefer saving and stability. If another spouse picks the freedom card, it says freedom on for the value, they may prioritize travel or spending on experiences today. And both of those are good things and can be a good balance, but it's revealing motivations for why my spouse, is so concerned with us running out of money, even though we have, plenty in terms of what we're making, what we're saving. But that's because they value security, and it's something that is a really important core value to them. And then it's relating it back to the financial plan. We need to have a travel goal. Like, we need to be able to spend $5,000 or whatever it is every year on travel. It's something that, we're not promised tomorrow. So we need to make it a priority to have this experience as a couple or as a family every year, and kind of tying it back to the plan.
Right. It's not all about just wealth accumulation and saving and getting ready for tomorrow, because, maybe tomorrow doesn't come and then we've missed out on some memories or opportunities. And, having that balance between what you can do today versus what you need to be doing for tomorrow, and what's a good use of money today versus what's something we should be setting aside to make sure that your future self is ready. I mean, thankfully that's our work, right? I mean, that's how we shine and do our best, is like meeting and working with clients and seeing the numbers and advising when maybe a $5,000 vacation is perfectly on point and acceptable. And in fact, we can encourage you to go do it. It's like long overdue. Like it's exactly how you should spend your money. Like, one of the best uses of money. This is a good investment in you and your relationship. And so see it as such, like, you don't need to save this. Versus maybe someone's like, you've had one too many vacations, and actually we need to find something that's a little budget friendly and tighten the belt, because unfortunately, like, things are not really set up for the long term. And so you're going to have to postpone that vacation. It's not feasible. Like, I've had conversations on both sides with clients, and certainly more enjoyable to have that permission setting conversation. Whereas if someone is situated and they're just a little hesitant to do it, to say, go ahead. But, the other side of this is, equally valid and necessary. And sometimes saying, hey, it is a better use of your money to go put that money somewhere else rather than spending it today. Well, one thing that's kind of standing out to me is this emphasis or the importance of shared and learning how to share the relationship. But, we also live in an individualistic age. There's a big focus on autonomy, and there's something to be said, I think, reasonably so for this, of one, giving each other, a person, a voice, but to recognize our differences and see we're not exactly the same, and to have freedom of action that isn't necessarily always in lockstep with each other. Perhaps it's a shared arrangement where you're coming to terms or compromises, but maybe there's just freedom within the relationship for one spouse to do what they like and another spouse to do what they want, or to have some individual expression. And so, I think what naturally would make sense is to share financial accounts, to share bank accounts, to do things together. But I don't necessarily think that everything has to be shared. And so, Kenny, I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts. Like, if someone came to you and said, hey, I don't know, I'm kind of wanting to have at least a little bit of my own money that I kind of do with what I want, and I don't have to run it by my spouse. Like, what's your take or feeling on that?
Yeah, I mean, a strategy that I've seen implemented really successfully with couples, and we do it as well, in terms of like the monthly budget or cash flow plan, or however you want to call it, is we're going to carve out a couple $100, $200 or 300 or whatever it is, 500 for just, that's my spending money. Like, I can spend it on whatever I want. I can go play golf or like buy pizza or whatever I want to, burn that part of the budget on. It's really just the amount that's been allocated, right? So it goes back to that idea of allocating that resource appropriately. But I think that carving that out for that individual expression as a couple on a monthly basis is really helpful, because you'll start to see those values surface and how that money's spent, right? If you value, golf or recreation or whatever, that's how it's going to be spent. If you value personal care and, taking care of yourself, it's going to be spent maybe at like the spa or whatever, whatever it might be. But I think it's a really helpful way to carve out that individual expression in terms of monthly cash flow, and you'll see those values surface, and it'll also lead to a sense of freedom and kind of relief, knowing like I can spend this chunk on whatever I want, and it's guilt free in a way, right? So I think it's a really good opportunity, and I've seen a lot of couples implement things that way.
Yeah, we have in our own budgeting software that we use a category of it. My wife's name is Deb, and so it's called Deb's Anything Spending. And the note,
Right.
because I keep and point on all the finances of it. And so there's maybe a risk in which I'm this bulldog and everything's falling on me, and I'm the one who decides everything. But
Like
to kind of keep
questioning
in balance.
everything, and
Yeah. Sorry, what was this about? Like, why did you spend that money? Or what? You didn't tell me about this. And
right.
it's good conversations, thankfully. I mean, we have good communication. But, I have this category, and we have this category, I should say, with my wife, and it's her anything spending. She can do whatever she wants with it. And, what's interesting in that, just seeing that firsthand, is how much money actually still comes back right to the family, because my wife, is just in her heart to get kind of buy and do things for the family, even if it means it's taking money out of her anything spending. But there are times, too, in which this is just an outright splurge or a pampering on her part. And it's like, look, it's my money. I wanted to go get pampered a little bit. I'm happy I spent it this way. That's what it's there for. And just to have that freedom, I think is really important, trying to find this dynamic of, yes, we're sharing it, but the plan the plan should be shared, in my opinion. I don't think it's a good idea to have marital finances separated out. And quite honestly, I just don't think it's in keeping with our Christian call or the church teaching on the matter for what that's worth. But there's definitely need and importance in a healthy relationship to have individual expression and outlets, and to have things, fall outside the norms, or, we're giving some allowance, for each party to do with the money as they think is right. And, it's not all exclusively shared. I think to push it that hard almost becomes problematic too. Well, Kenny, I've really enjoyed this conversation and having you on the show and getting your insights, and just, this is a topic that we haven't chatted about, and I'm glad we did today. If someone wanted to follow up and learn a little bit more about you and your background and the firm with which you're affiliated, could you just kind of tell them, where to go and find you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation too. So thank you for having me on, Ben. And I think you'll probably post it in the show notes, but our website is lwp-llc.com. So I'm with Legacy Wealth Partners, very small firm out in the Denver area, but work with couples and clients all over the country. So you can also just Google Kenny Senour financial planner. There's not a ton of Kennys in Denver, it turns out, at least doing what I'm doing. So it's pretty easy to find me that way.
Well, good. Folks, I hope you do reach out to Kenny. It's been a delight having him on. If you're looking for others too, consider the Catholic Financial Planners Network as well as a resource to turn to. As a bit of a fun fact, and I feel almost the need to shout this out, Kenny was sharing with me ahead of the call that his older sister, actually was one of my close grad friends, along with my wife and I. We went to Franciscan back in the day. And, her name is Jenny. She's gone to be married. And as we were getting ready for this, I was like, man, that last name seems really familiar. It didn't hit me until Kenny made mention of it. So Kenny, that's just yet another really special connection that we have. We're really glad that you're part of the network, and, part of, an advisor available to the Catholic faithful to help them for their needs. So thank you for the good work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Ben. Yeah, it's a small Catholic world. We're all over the country, as you know.
Yeah, it's just such a small world. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening today and attending. Please continue to tune in. And until next time, God's blessings to you. We'll be in touch. Bye now.